Last year, I went on a quick business trip for work and decided to drive instead of flying. I've always hated airports and planes, so I'd drive whenever I could. I rented 2 Airbnbs, one on the way there and one on the way back. Everything seemed fine on the way up. However, I cannot say the same for the return trip. I arrived at Airbnb late in the evening after a long day of travel. As I walked around the house, I had the feeling that something was wrong. The decor was old-fashioned, with dark wood furniture and thick curtains. The air was thin, and there was a faint odor of cigarette smoke. I looked back online, and the pictures showed different furniture and a completely different layout. It was difficult to tell whether it was the same house. It was, but it looked very different. I brushed it off because I was tired and annoyed. I was only there for the night, so if it was a place to stay, that was fine by me. The code on the door worked, so they must have simply posted the wrong pictures or lied to increase bookings. I tossed my travel bags against the wall, showered, and then fell asleep in bed. But in the middle of the night, I was startled awake by a loud noise. It sounded like something had fallen over in the corridor. I sat up in bed and listened carefully, but there was no other sound. I tried to fall back asleep, but my mind would not let me, without first checking the house. I got up and entered the hallway. It was empty. Nobody was present, and nothing appeared to have fallen anywhere. I checked the other rooms just in case, but there was nothing. I returned to the bedroom, and as I walked in, I noticed something moving into the bathroom. I froze. It was silent until someone stepped out of the doorway. He was tall and thin and appeared starved and feral. He stated it firmly. Fearfully, I pointed to my bag against the wall, noticing a kitchen knife in his hand. He picked up the bag and slung it over his shoulder before instructing me to enter the hallway. As I took a step back, I noticed another man standing at the end of the hallway, looking similar to the other. They both looked at me like hungry wolves, ready to attack at any time. "Please let me go," I said it softly. When the man in the hallway turned to look at something around the corner, my instinct kicked in, and I dashed for the front door. I got out and sprinted down the road, arriving at a gas station and dialing 911. The men were gone, but the cops hinted that robberies and attacks were common in the area. It became much clearer when I saw the neighborhood during the day. I had never been there before, so I had no idea I was staying in a bad area. I never imagined an Airbnb would be in a bad neighborhood. The most terrifying part was when I ran away. I swear I heard more than 2 sets of footsteps following me. My best friend, whom I'll call Michael for privacy, was returning to town from college in the summer of 2018. I was also in college, but I stayed in town to pursue my studies. Because we only saw each other a few times a year, we would take a couple of days off and rent an Airbnb or hotel to hang out, catch up on life, and do other things. We both still lived with our parents, so there wasn't much we could do at home. Anyway, we discovered a small cottage nestled in the woods with a cozy fireplace and a stunning view. It seemed like the ideal setting for a weekend of relaxation and catch up. Plus, it was significantly less expensive than the other Airbnbs and hotels. It was approximately 2 hours from where we were. On Friday morning, I drove over to Michael's place to pick him up before heading to Airbnb. We talked and caught up, but to be honest, the drive was pretty boring. The roads were empty, and we only passed through one town along the way. When we arrived, however, the cabin looked nice from the outside. We got our bags out of the car and used the key code to open the front door. The interior was attractive, just as it appeared in the pictures, but it was not particularly clean. The floors were covered in dirty footprints, as if someone had wandered through the forest without taking off their shoes. The bedding appeared to have been washed, which was the most important factor. We settled in, talked for a while, and then went out to explore the forest surrounding the cabin. Both of us were avid nature lovers who enjoyed long walks and hikes. We came across a path near the back of the cabin and followed it for a while before it ended. However, it is not the typical end of a path. The path had no actual point, it was simply a straight line through the woods with an abrupt end. It was weird, but we didn't think much of it. We followed it back to the cabin as the sun began to set. As we got closer, I noticed Michael looking around a lot, as if he was nervous, but he is never scared. "Is everything okay?" I asked. Yeah, I just thought I saw someone over there. It's probably nothing though." I looked where he was pointing. but there wasn't anything to see. It was already somewhat dark by then, so there was no use in looking. When we got back, Michael took a shower, and I started making some of the food we brought, but something fell off. I couldn't help but notice that there seemed to be more footprints around the house than there were before. Some of them even went right up to where our bags were, but as far as I could tell, nothing was missing. I asked Michael what he thought, but he wasn't so convinced, saying he thought the footprints were already there. We continued with our night, getting ready for bed around 10. The way the cabin was set up, there was a living room and kitchen. Right when you walk in, there is one bedroom that has 2 beds and a bathroom in it. We both took a bed and fell asleep. A few hours into the night, I woke up to Michael whispering my name. He was calling for me, telling me to wake up. I looked over, and I saw him sitting up. In his bed. What's happening? He pointed at the door. Someone's inside. Then I heard the soft, intentional, quiet footsteps of someone walking across the cabin, right outside the bedroom door. My heart tightened up. We both sat there listening to this person fumble around with something out there, and then he came right up to the door. There was a long moment of silence before they turned away and left the cabin. We got up and pushed some furniture against the doors, staying up the rest of the night and leaving first thing in the morning. Maybe we should have called the cops, but in our defense, we were out in the middle of nowhere and had nothing but footprints to back up our case. We got a refund the next day since we left early. No apology or anything, they just refunded the money and said nothing. I don't travel much outside of town, so this was one of the few times I had to stay somewhere other than a friend's or family's house. The area where I needed to stay was small, and the majority of the hotels did not look particularly nice, but to my surprise, there was a single home listed on Airbnb. It was my first time using the site, but the house looked like a decent place, far superior to the hotels. I requested the dates, and the venue was booked within minutes. The following week, I began driving when I arrived in the town, which was approximately 14 hours from my home. It was late into the night. In comparison to where I had previously lived, the town appeared almost deserted. All the houses and lights were turned off and all the stores were closed. There were no people or cars out. Of course, it was the middle of the night, so I didn't expect this small town to be lit up and active at that hour. But it was still eerie given that I hadn't seen it during the day. I came in with this as my first impression. The street that led me to the Airbnb was also dark, winding through a densely forested neighborhood before arriving at the house. It was one of the few with a porch and outdoor lights on, but there was also light coming through one of the upstairs windows. I assumed the previous customer had simply forgotten to turn it off, so I ignored it and began moving my belongings to the front door. I retrieved the key code from my email and opened the door, entering and locking it behind me. I quickly put my belongings in the corner of the room and went upstairs to turn off the light that had been left on. It was a spare bedroom with only a bed and a small dresser. I flicked it. I went off, then went to the main bedroom to arrange my belongings. I was only staying for one night, but I booked it for 2 because I needed to be there late the next day. I was only awake for about an hour before retiring to bed. I rested my eyes and attempted to sleep, but I remained awake for a long time. I sat up quickly after hearing a thud echo through the walls of the house. I stared at the door, trying to think of what could have caused the sound, but nothing came to mind, so I got up to investigate. I opened the door softly and looked into the upstairs hallway. It was dark and quiet. There are no more thuds, only the sound of the house swaying in the wind. I took a step back and quietly shut the door, but a strange feeling overcame me, and I had to wait while I thought about the sound I had heard. As I stood there, soft creaks began to run across the floorboards from the other room. I listened with my ear against the door as the creaking moved into the hallway and then towards the door. I was so surprised that I almost didn't realize it was the footsteps of someone approaching. My heart raced as they approached the other side of the door. I gripped the door handle tightly to keep it from moving, and only a moment later, I felt it pulled downward. They backed off as soon as I resisted. There was a brief moment beforehand. Suddenly, the handle was forced down, and they slammed against the door. It swung halfway open before I pushed my body back inside. I only saw half of their faces in the doorway, but their eyes were filled with an anger I hadn't expected to see. After a struggle, I managed to push the door back into the latch and lock it. The man on the other side tried to reopen it, But after yelling a few unpleasant words at me, he dashed downstairs and out of the house. I was still catching my breath, and my mind was racing, but I got myself together and called 911. They arrived quickly, considering how small the town was. The Airbnb owner continued with the case after I left the next day, but I wish I had followed up. That man seemed desperate to get into my room and was enraged, as if he wanted to hurt me or accuse me of something. Everything about it is disturbing, and I don't think I'll ever get it out of my head, but I doubt I'll use Airbnb again for a long time.